public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding Bills number 160170, 160171, 160172, and Resolution number 160180. Mr. Stitt, please read the titles of the bills and resolutions.
Bill number 160170, an ordinance to adopt the capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2017 through 2022 inclusive. Bill number 160171, an ordinance to adopt the fiscal 2017 capital budget. Bill number 160172, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2017. Resolution number 160180, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2017 through 2021 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2016, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, the authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement authorized by an ordinance of this council approved by the mayor on January 3, 1992, Bill number 1563-A, by and between the city and the authority.
Thank you, Mr. Stitt. Today, we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2017, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2017 through fiscal 2022. Mr. Stitt, today, we will actually hear testimony from the following departments: Pension Board, SEPTA, Community College of Philadelphia, City Commissioners, departmental callbacks, in particular OPA, later this afternoon. Mr. Stitt, the first name of the individual testifying is?
Fran Bielli.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bielli, please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning, Council President Clark. Members of Council, thank you for inviting us here today. My name is Francis Bielli, Executive Director of the Board of Pensions. With me is Deputy Director Shamika Talaferro, Compliance Officer Christopher DeFusco, other members of our executive staff, and the Chair of the Board, Mr. Rob DeBoe. Before I read it, you have my testimony, but before I read a brief summary, I just wanted to thank those of you. We've met with a number of you in order to work cooperatively to try to come up with some ideas to strengthen the plan, and I appreciate your participation in that. Our budget request is slightly less than FY16 estimated obligation levels. The demographics of our staff is 77% female, 57% African American, 4% Hispanic, and 4% Asian American. Our current executive staff is 60% female and 60% African American. The plan's funding percentage decreased from 45.8% to 45% as of July 1, 2015. The board voted unanimously to again reduce the assumed rate of return. Over the last 8 years, the assumed rate of return has been reduced 100 basis points, or 1%, from 8.75% to the current 7.75%. According to the board's actuary, while the funding ratio may appear to reflect lack of progress in funding, the decrease in the assumed rate of return represents improvement of the fund's risk profile, improving the likelihood of achieving the assumption in the future. The fund's investment return for the fiscal year ending June 2015 was relatively flat at 0.30%. Although recent returns have not captured the entire market upside, the long-term returns are favorable when compared to other well-known funds. For example, over a 3, 5, and 10-year period through June 30th, 2015, our fund has outperformed PSERS by 3.09%, 2.27%, and 1.35% respectively for each period. Our fund has also slightly outperformed CalPERS, the country's largest public pension fund, over a 10-year period. The board recently voted to divest from all but 2 hedge fund investments due to subpar performance and high fees. Staff is actively renegotiating lower fees with the 2 remaining hedge funds that were willing to do so. The fund is also continuing its effort to lower fees by using a greater number of index funds in its portfolio. To date, approximately 40% of the fund's assets are in index products. The board recently selected a new investment consultant. The trustees and staff will work closely with the consultant to review the asset allocation and make necessary adjustments going forward. Diversity Investment Managers handle 16.07% of the fund's assets. This accounts for approximately $716.3 million. Through the second quarter, the total percentage of all investment fees paid to diversity managers was 18.14%, an increase from the 14.35% in the previous fiscal year. Using our investment manager database, the board once again conducted a utilization study to determine the universe of divestment managers that meet the fund's criteria, which is having a 3-year track record and at least $100 million assets under management. The results are that 9.5% of the firms and 6.1% of the products had greater than 50% minority or women ownership. The fund's current lineup of investment managers includes 22.2% diversity managers. Local managers account for 12.28% of the assets under management. Both of those figures far surpassing the universe that the utilization study showed us. The board has also pursued socially responsible initiatives through our shareholder proxy voting. For example, the board led a shareholder proposal to Cabot Oil and Gas requesting that Cabot improve its procedures for consideration of diversity and female candidates for board of directors. As a result, Cabot added their first female board member and made changes to its published selection criteria for board candidates. The board also continues to work as a member of the 30% Coalition, which is a national organization committed to the goal of women holding 30% of board seats across public companies. We respectfully request that you approve our budget, and we'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I got a couple of questions. I'm going to start out with page 1 of your testimony. It talks about the board continuing to work diligently to reduce management fees and costs. And as you know, there's been a conversation around this issue as it relates to hedge funds. So can you talk to me in a level of detail about how the board is working to reduce the management fees, and are we still dealing with or anticipate dealing with hedge funds?
We currently have 2 hedge funds remaining in our portfolio, and we are renegotiating those fees. They are 2 of the 7 hedge funds that agreed to renegotiate their fee structure with us. The reason we did that is because, frankly, we've been getting subpar performance from the hedge funds, especially given the fees that they charge. I can give you an example that 2 years ago, our fees were approximately $31 million. They've been reduced to under $28 million for the past fiscal year, which is a significant reduction. That came to 0.62% of our portfolio. So when you're looking at an expense ratio, that would be the equivalent of 0.62%. However, out of that $31 million 2 years ago, even though it was only roughly 10% of our portfolio, hedge funds accounted for $17 million of the $31 million in fees. Unless you're getting superior returns, the board determined that it's just not worth it. The returns have been subpar. So as of now, we are not looking to invest further in hedge funds at this point, unless they can make a compelling case that their net return, which is after all fees paid, are going to surpass our assumed rate of return. One other thing which is 7.75%. One other thing that we're negotiating with going forward with many of our investment managers is something called a hurdle rate, that they don't start to get their fees until they meet that hurdle of our assumed rate of return. And we're trying to do that in the area of all alternative investments, and we think that makes sense.
Okay. So that kind of leads me to my next question in reference to quote-unquote hurdle fees. So, you know, I'm a layperson, a politician, but a layperson in some aspects of government. So I see this commercial, you may have seen a commercial with the dad and the little kid walking down the street, and they're talking about investments, and, you know, the dad's talking about, yeah, we invested that. And the kid asked simple questions. He said, well, you know, do you make money? He says, well, sometimes. He said, well, what happens when you don't make money? Do do you still have to pay them? And the dad says, yes. And the kid says, why? So I guess I asked that question in terms of our investment and who we contract to do our investment. Do we still have to pay certain fees associated with their activity, even if we lose money? And I guess if the answer is yes, then I'm going to ask why.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a great commercial.
That's
and you're
why
right.
they did a commercial.
When we look at that commercial, you say, yeah, why are we paying those fees? But you're right. So in the area of hedge funds, let's say, there's a fee structure, and that's a management fee and a performance fee, right? So let's say 2% and 20%. So 2% is a management fee, 20% is a performance fee. It could be 1.5 and 15, but let's just stick with 2 and 20. So yeah, you're right. If they have a bad year, they say, tough, pay me 2%. You have another bad year, tough, pay me 2%. That's not good, right? We don't want to do that. So we want to have a hurdle rate. If they get above our assumed rate of return, then you can start instituting the fees. And that's not unheard of in the industry. The performance fee, okay, if you perform at a certain level, we're happy to pay the performance fee. Not happy, but we'll agree to pay the performance fee. But the management fee is something that we don't think is justified unless the fund is making us money.
All right,
and that's something that we're working on.
So at some point, we anticipate having all of our portfolio reflect a hurdle.
We think in the alternative investments, we're working on that. As far as the regular long-only equity, which is public stocks and fixed income, there are really no hurdle fees in those areas, but you pay a much smaller fee. For example, in our index products, we may pay 2 basis points for our fund, which is nothing. It's cheaper than what Vanguard charges for their funds. So in that respect, it's very good. If you take out our alternative assets, our expense ratio for the rest of our fund is about 0.13%, which is tremendous. It's tremendously low, and that's good. So I think that commercial is really a good point, because what the board is trying to do here is to get back to basics, to return to basics. And sometimes the investments that are the most exotic and some people think they're the most attractive aren't always the case.
Okay. And one last question, then I'll give up the mic. The pension board's interaction with the government, what do you anticipate the return on the sales tax legislation that was put together by the General Assembly, I guess a couple of years ago, because the projections didn't meet expectations earlier, where we actually had to spend general fund dollars, particularly as it relates to the borrowing. Is the pension board involved in that level of conversation as they project the income, the revenue generated by the sales tax, the state sales tax proposal, or not proposal, law now?
Yeah, Rob may want to add more to that, but however, yes, we did have our actuary do some projections concerning the effect of the sales tax and the increase of the sales tax. And as you know, even though right now with paying down the $15 million per year in the debt service, and then the additional $120 million going to the school district, the pension fund gets the additional amount. Right. Down the road, we will see by 2020 approximately $52 million coming to the pension fund. So in between 2017 and 2020, we see it incrementally increase.
No, yeah. No, Rand,
that's what I was going to say.
No, you might as well go on the record if you concur with that analysis, that projection.
Yes, that's a projection that by 2021 we get to $50 million, and I think over the 5-year plan, it's a total of $180 million. And the way the actuary calculates that, we give him those numbers, and then he puts that above the MMO payment to figure out kind of the impact on the fund.
Okay. Real quick, I'm sorry. Is there anything done differently in terms of projecting the revenues generated now versus the 2 years where we did not meet our expectation? Or was there just something, an anomaly in the economy that created that shortfall?
Yeah, we think that was an anomaly. I mean, it's still the same basic projection methodology, and this year it looks good.
Okay. All right, thank you. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to each of you. I know you don't hear this often, but I want to say thank you for the work that you've done in managing the system under the great strains and stress of the vagaries associated with the market. The pension costs 15.4% of our proposed FY17 budget. Retirees outnumbering current employees. You know, we're struggling to meet our MMO. $10.5 billion of unfunded liability, of actuarial liability, 4.8 in assets, and 5.7 billion of unfunded liability. You all, under great strain, have done an awesome job. And I just wanted to note for the record, you haven't gotten a lot of credit for having reduced the assumed rate of return from 8.75% in FY08 to 7.75% in 16. But I needed to state that for the record, because if you read some articles that I've seen over the past 6 months, it would be as if you all are living in fantasy land and have never taken that step. So thank you for your prudence.
Thank you.
Let me just start by talking about an issue that's of grave importance to me, and you mentioned it a little when you talked about hedge funds and the direction that the fund is taking. But I read an article recently that was in the Fund Fire Financial Times service, and it talked about New York pensions demand diversity in management evaluation. And so across the country, we have 97% of hedge fund owners are white men, and 83% of portfolio managers are white. However, there was a McKinsey study that found that companies across industries in the top 25% in terms of gender diversity and racial and ethnic diversity were 15 to 35% more likely to produce financial returns above the median, respectively. And I mention that to say not only does this diversity and inclusion, does it lead and make good financial, moral sense, but it makes good economic and financial sense. With that in mind, talk to us about the decrease that we see in contracts from the MBE, WBE side, but put it in context of your overall reductions in the number of contracts.
Right. So in the hedge fund area, none of the managers that were terminated were diversity managers. In fact, one of the managers, hedge fund managers that remain, Elizabeth Park, is owned by an African-American male out of Cleveland. And you are exactly right in that McKinsey study that you cite, because we have found that to be the case over the last several years, is that what people call in the industry emerging managers, which are smaller managers, right? They don't have as much money, assets under management. They're hungry. They're willing to work for their fees. We find that the newer emerging managers perform better, consistent with what that study found. So we look in that arena. We attend the Emerging Managers seminar each year in Chicago, and we are very active with organizations such as NASP and MAPS that are largely diversity and emerging manager focused. So that's very important to us, and that's why our assets under management for emerging managers more than double what our utilization study shows is the universe out there, which is 9.4%. So that's very, very important to us. And another aspect of that is we used to have a fund-of-fund manager handle our diversity program. PFM and FIS used to handle that, but we brought that direct in-house, and that has several effects. Number one, the emerging managers get to market themselves by saying we do business directly with the city of Philadelphia, as opposed to saying we do business with a fund-of-fund manager who also does business with the city of Philadelphia.
Let me just ask for my benefit, and other council members, I'm sure those who have been here, they know this. Could you all provide us with a summary of the overall sort of diversity and portfolio management over at the fund? And just if it's a 1-2 pages procedure that sort of outlines the firms, the value of the contracts. That would just be a quick snapshot that would be beneficial to me.
Yeah, we'd be
And
glad to
if
do
you
that.
So thank you. My next question is in regards to a trend that we've seen taking place across the nation. And the issue of sort of retirement security has been one that I've been very passionate about. And we've seen this trend, and we saw it during the last contract negotiations with this move to, or the inclusion of a Plan 10. So the trend that we're seeing across the nation is a move from traditional defined benefit plans that provide an income, an assured income, to the defined contribution plans, which in essence shift the risk of management, to individual employees. Now, with that being said, give us an overview about of Plan 10, where Plan 10 stands now, how the numbers in terms of people enrolled, and what kind of cost savings, or is it too young for you to even give an estimate?
So I'll start with the cost savings first. So the actuary has indicated that to get an exact number of the cost savings at this young point in Plan 10 would be highly speculative, just because the number of people in Plan 10 are so low at this point that it's hard to come up with some concrete numbers as to what the savings may or may not be. However, each person is capped at 20 years of credited service under Plan 10, whereas in Plan Y, that's not the case. Under Plan 10, a person is getting 1.25% for each year of credited service, whereas under Plan Y, it's 2.2% for the first 10 years and 2.0% for each year thereafter. So they are some of the immediate differences. So there will be some sort of savings, but again, we can't pinpoint as a dollar figure what those savings would be.
Thank you for that response, and we'll continue to watch that closely. I just needed to point out for the record that an assured income versus the vagaries of the market is the trend or direction that I would hope that we could continue to move towards. I know there have been some other thoughts and ideas presented as potential options, and I know we in this body will get an opportunity to explore those in the near future. But the idea of shifting the burden of retirement security to individual employees, I don't want to even have to make a determination, about whether it should be stocks, or some other sort of safer mode of savings, because that's not what I do. It's kind of like when, you go see the cardiologist and he or she does a great job, but I don't want them putting a perm in my hair, right? So, we work, but, I don't think individual employees, particularly with the vagaries associated with the wealth disparity in minority communities with those who actually have a savings. So I have a few more questions, and Mr. President, I'll get to those during the next round, but thank you for your responses.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Following up on Councilwoman Parker's original line of questioning as it relates to the firms that you hire to advise you, can you walk me through the process of how the board determines which financial advisors and or firms that you hire?
Yes. So for long-only equity, public stock funds, and for fixed income, it's an RFP process. So we publish an RFP on our website, and companies respond to the RFP, and those RFPs are reviewed. They are reviewed by a committee. They are narrowed down, and then normally the finalists have an opportunity to make a presentation to the board, and the board will select the investment managers.
And generally, how many firms apply to this?
It varies on the mandate. So, for example, a long-only, large-cap equity manager would have a large number of responses. A more let's say, an international small cap fund is a much smaller universe, so we'll get many less responses. But it could be upwards of 60 to 70 firms for a large cap mandate.
And the RFP generally determines the length of service? Or is it,
So
or once you are hired, you're hired until?
They're year-to-year contracts.
Year-to-year?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And then I would assume you hire a company, and you like them, but how do you determine their work? I mean, how do you evaluate their work? How does that come down?
So it's normally investment return over a period of time. We're not going to make a determination after 3 or 4 months, for example, that the manager is no good. You give them a representative period of time, but that varies. There's no magic number. And some companies have a specific mandate. For example, the board may hire someone to fit within the asset allocation that is a value manager, let's say. And they invest in companies that they feel are undervalued and that over time that true value will be represented. So they may be out of favor at any given particular period, but the board may hold on to them because, again, the market is cyclical and their type of investing may return down the road.
Well, because the determination is, and I get that requirements and understanding, but my next question to you would be, those that have those yearly contracts, are they evaluated each year?
They're evaluated every single month. Our consultant comes in every single month with something called a flash report, which is available on the pension board website, and gives the return each and every month for the trailing 3 months, fiscal year to date, calendar year to date, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and since inception returns. So the board sees these, the consultant reviews them, staff reviews them every single month. We do more in-depth analysis of our investment managers on a quarterly basis, on a rotating quarterly basis, where staff actually writes a report, the consultant actually writes a report on every single manager to ensure that, number one, they're performing well, number two, they haven't changed their mandate, which they were originally hired for, and then number three, there's been no key personnel changes which may alter, our position on that manager. So yeah, it's a constant investment, and even between the monthly board meetings, the staff is regularly monitoring. We have a chief compliance officer, risk manager, who monitors all of our investments and ensures that they're within the scope of what they were originally hired to do.
And is there, you don't have to name the firm, but are there firms that you have in your employ? What is the longest length of service for one of your firms?
Well, we have firms that have been with us for probably since inception, which would be an index, right? And an index is the index. It's not subject to the vagaries of an individual investment manager, for example.
Right.
It's always subject to the vagaries of the market, right? Because the market will do what it will do. But, so we have index managers that have been with us since, by inception, I refer to 1988, because that's when it started being measured on a regular basis.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. Just a few questions. And most of this was done through, I got through PICA and other sources as far as questions I'm going to ask you. And I realize these are sensitive questions, but I figured I might as well go for it. I'm doing it for hopefully the benefit of the city. So here's the first question. Our employee contributions, and I know this is a sensitive subject, our employee contributions, the median non-uniformed employee pension contributions in the 10 largest U.S. cities are 6% for the uniformed employees, 6% overall, while uniformed is 8%. We don't have that in Philadelphia. Just by following the rules of what everybody else is doing, we would generate $45 million more per year for the pension. So my question to you, is that something that you would support, the fixed pension, or is that something that you would not support?
As executive director of the pension fund, I would always support more revenue for the Board of Pensions and for the fund.
So that's just one step of claim, and I'm sure that people are not going to like it, but that's $45 million a year. The other is drop. And from 2010 to 2014, drop has cost us $82.2 million. Do we have any projection what we anticipate it costing us for the next 4 or 5 years?
Well, when you're referring to cost, I'd have to ask just in return to clarify, are you talking about what's been paid out in drop or what the actual cost is? Because they are two different things.
So the payout from 2010 to 2014, what we paid out was $82.2 million.
Right. So I mean, I can give you actually more exact figures. I mean, we've paid out in the history of drop, we've paid out $1.278 billion in drop since since it started.
1.27 billion
Correct.
since it started.
Right, with 10,668 people retiring via drop since inception.
And Councilwoman Parker mentioned that our unfunded liability right now is about 5.7 billion,
About 5.9 billion.
5.9 billion today with adjustments. And that was 1.25 billion just for drop.
Correct.
Okay. And do you have any idea what it might be costing us the next 4 or 5 years? Is there any projection?
I can tell you that we have from 1/1/16 going forward, some of those people may have retired already, but we have 1,480 people scheduled to retire between that date and FY21.
I'm trying to get my hands around this drop thing, but because the President of the United States, when he changes his jobs of President, we give them about 50 days to change for the biggest job in the country, President of the United States. Why did we need 4 years for drop? I'm trying to figure that out.
I think since I didn't write the legislation, I can't answer that question.
Okay. Last question for now. We have this clause, I guess, that pension compensation is highly affected by overtime, where you have people who work tremendous amounts of overtime certain years, which causes their pension costs to go up. And I think the study was done that the impact is roughly $5.3 million annually because of the overtime consideration on pensions. If we would eliminate overtime from this computation for non-uniformed pension plan people, and I understand the police and fire are eliminated from it right now. They don't get that benefit.
That's correct.
Why would we not do that for everyone else?
I think that's something that would be subject to mandatory bargaining, and I can't really comment on that. And I don't have the figures. That study, I don't know if that study was on our fund or not, but I don't have the exact figures as to how much overtime has contributed to the annual pension.
So if it's possible, I think we have to solve this pension problem is a series of 6 steps. And these may be some of them, but I would like to, in the near future, maybe you can come up with Revenue Finance Department and come up back to us with 6 steps you think we should do that are realistic, that we can enact as City Council to make this pension healthy and available and make sure it's available for those people that are entitled to it down the road.
I have no objection to that, but I would also add that there is currently a task force that's at work that involves union administration folks on that task force, and I know that they are working at exploring various changes in order to strengthen the pension fund, but this would also be a welcome addition to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Following up some questions that both Councilman Parker and Councilman Thallenberg asked, and I wanted to focus on the Opportunity Fund. From my understanding, the previous Chief Investment Officer was the one that made the change from the manager-manager relationship to what we currently have. And one of those managers is FIS, which you stated earlier in your testimony, which is a firm of color. And based on your testimony, you stated by moving from the manager-manager scenario to having a direct relationship with the city, it provides a better interaction between some of these emerging managers. My question is, how has that worked in reference to what type of outreach has the Board of Pensions made in reference to developing that relationship, and also going forward to make sure that we're increasing the number of emerging managers, which you stated in your testimony, are doing somewhat of a better job in getting a better rate of return for the city?
So let me just start off by saying the previous CIO made a recommendation to the board, and the board accepted that recommendation, so the board is the one who changed the Opportunity Fund, not the CIO. Number two is that when FIS had the portfolio, only 50% of the managers were diversity managers. The rest were not diversity managers. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, yes, the emerging managers themselves have indicated to us that they like doing business directly with the City of Philadelphia to be able to use that to market themselves to other public pension funds. That, in essence, is the purpose of an emerging manager program, is to give these emerging managers an opportunity in order for them to be able to go and grow their business elsewhere. However, I don't want to lose track of the fact that the board's first and foremost obligation is to hire good quality investment managers. And we agree with Councilwoman Parker and that study that she alluded to, that we have found that the emerging managers have outperformed a lot of the more established managers. It's true, that report has been true. So we have reached out through our consultants. As I indicated, we just hired a new consultant. The name is Marquette Consultants. They're based out of Chicago. And Marquette holds an emerging manager symposium, a national symposium each and every year. And we will attend that. In fact, that's the symposium that we've been attending in Chicago for the last couple of years. So, and Marquette themselves has a very, very good outreach to minority managers. They showed us the lineup of minority managers that they have reviewed and they have access to. So we anticipate that the 22% that we have right now will just increase going forward.
Okay. Also, under the Opportunity Fund and what you define as emerging manager, what percentage of, as a group, do they have under management?
I'm sorry.
What percentage under the Opportunity Fund of assets under management does the entire Opportunity Fund have under management?
I'm not sure I'm following your question. I'm sorry.
So in the Opportunity Fund, they represent various emerging managers which have assets under management. As a whole, what's the total amount that's in the Opportunity Fund of assets?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that was. So in our Opportunity Fund, diversity managers handle 16.0% of the fund's assets. This accounts for approximately $716.3 million.
And how does that compare with other jurisdictions in reference to similar type of funds?
I think it's higher than many jurisdictions.
And then looking at the budget detail in our budget book, I don't see the vendors that are listed, those firms of color that we're working with. Is there a reason why that's not in the budget detail?
No, I think we put the top 5 contracts in there.
Well, in your testimony, yes, I saw it in testimony, but in reference to the budget detail in our binder, I didn't see that information.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you. I'm not sure why we didn't designate that, but we'd be glad to do that. I think that might be in the summary that Councilwoman Parker asked for also that we'll provide to you.
Also, you mentioned earlier in the beginning of your testimony that you participate in the National Association of Securities Professionals. Will you be attending their annual conference?
Yeah, we will be attending. In fact, I was invited to speak at one of the conferences, so we will be doing that, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Per the Council President's questions, could you provide to our office the list of equity managers we continue to have and the compensation received and the rate of return that they had?
Yes.
Is that possible? Okay,
yes, we will
great.
do that.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask a few questions about our investments with the pension fund. So do we have any investments in companies that have closed plants in the U.S. and open plants in other countries?
We have a number of restrictions, but I'll have to check on that. I don't know if we do or not. I know that Pfizer would have been in the mix of our index products, and I know that they pulled out of that that merger that would have had them located outside of the U.S. Yeah, we have a number of restrictions, but I don't know. We can have our data, we can check that on our
That's easy enough
database
to
to see if
find.
that's the case. I think we can do that.
Okay,
yes.
that's great. And similarly, could you talk about any companies that have moved their corporate offices or subsidiaries overseas?
We can check on that also.
Okay. In particular, because it's important for us to understand about which companies are, invested in building, and we want to be thoughtful about companies that are doing, other kinds of things to avoid payment of taxes. So, and how much of our pension fund is invested in companies that are headquartered in Philadelphia, in the Delaware Valley, and in the state of Pennsylvania?
So our investment managers, 12.28% in Philadelphia, a little higher when you count the Philadelphia and the suburban areas.
And is there any barrier to prioritizing more local investment in our local economy?
No, all things being equal, assuming that the investment managers are relatively equal as far as the analysis is concerned, we would always prefer to hire the local manager.
But if 88% is going outside of our local economy, what exactly are the factors that are not allowing for greater investment in this area?
As far as investment managers, maybe the amount of investment managers that reply to our RFPs, there's not enough local managers. It could be that the managers are just not performing as well as the other managers who are also applying. There could be various factors. I don't know exactly, but again, if the managers are two equal managers, we will always opt with the local manager.
But have you made an effort, or has your department made an effort to understand the analysis about what are the barriers to blocking greater investment in Philadelphia? I wouldn't want this to be all on surmising of who or what might be available, because it sounds like we're in the area of guessing.
There are no surmising. It's just basic numbers when it comes to investments. Either the manager performs or they don't perform, and that's what our analysis is based on.
My question is, have you done a fuller analysis of the availability of local managers? So you're saying, my question was, are you identifying what particular barriers there are to not providing greater investment in our local economy? And you put out there that you are unclear about, it could be that we don't have an availability of local managers, or we don't have local managers that perform. So to me, there's a big difference between the two, and I would like to know whether you are you saying that your analysis shows that there's one or the other, or one versus the other, or what, or are we in this area of we don't know the landscape?
I'll tell you that I'm not confused about it at all. The bar to whether we're investing in local managers is whether they're performing or not. There is no other bar. There is no bar as to availability or whether the local manager can or cannot do business with the fund. As I said, if they're performing and they reply to our mandate, all things being equal, we would prefer to have the local manager.
So you'll be able to provide to us the private equity managers that we do have and their compensation, rate of return?
Absolutely.
That kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President.
Welcome, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We've had, continuous conversations. I know Rob DeVoe's back there as he smiles at me, but about the pension reform of the pension board, and that's kind of out there. But in addition to that, recently Controller Buckovitz introduced an idea, and I actually went over with his invitation to talk to him about his concept around how to reduce the pension debt. And I know that he is kind of getting those, his assumptions, I think, or other things kind of checked out. Have you had a chance to talk to Controller Buckovitz about his concept in reducing the pension debt?
So you're talking about the buyout proposal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked a great deal, and at the controller's request, our actuary did an analysis. There are actually two proposals. One is a straight buyout, and one is a payment to members to have them get an upfront payment in exchange for converting to a less generous defined benefit plan.
Right.
The actuary gave some preliminary results of that analysis at our last board meeting. Based on that analysis, at the controller's suggestion, we've kind of, we're not going to pursue the straight buyout option, and we've asked for further analysis of the option to have an upfront payment in exchange for moving to a less generous defined benefit plan. So that analysis we'll probably see at our next board meeting.
Okay. So while you wait for that analysis, so I had said in a newspaper interview that I was not familiar with the details of his plan, so I didn't really want to comment, but of course I would be concerned about people cashing in on needed retirement funds. But what about people who have a couple of pensions? They retired early from the city, they got another job, they have another pension, they work another job. They may want to have an early buyout of their pension, and they're not really at risk of not having retirement funds. Is there an option for those folks?
So I think we're still looking at the second option, which would probably be attractive to them. The first option actually didn't work from the pension fund's perspective.
Okay,
there wasn't
I got you.
a good enough return for the pension fund.
Okay, I'm
and we
sorry.
want to make sure that whatever we did would actually help the fund.
Right. Thank you very much for that clarification. In terms of the overall pension system, the board and everything, how it works, the managers and all that stuff, I understand you're changing managers. Is there a way to more systematically kind of have performance-based contracting? You know, people get a certain amount of work, and based on the return that they're getting, they increase the work that they get with the pension board. And if they go below a certain amount, then, you know, I know we need to give people a chance and the markets fluctuate, but wouldn't we cut them off earlier? In other words, wouldn't we remove them from doing the pension board work?
So Fran might want to add more, but we look every month at results, and based on those results, we determine what actions to take with managers, whether to increase the amount they have, decrease, terminate them. But as you said, it's not something that you would look at 1 month and say, oh, that was a bad month, we want to get rid of that manager. You want to look at them over a period of time. You want to understand kind of what their strategy is and how their strategy is supposed to do in particular markets. And if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do in those markets, that's when you really want to look at, you know, at taking action to reduce what our investment is with them.
So before you answer that, or if you're going to answer that, I will say that I have proposed, I don't know where this is going to go, but in the bill, that we add 4 professional level managers to the pension board for the reason you stated, that although there's a lot of smart people with public interest at heart, they're not really professionals when it comes to pensions. And so you have looked at the returns, and people before you have looked at returns, and yet here we are in this dismal situation. Wouldn't you, in other words, you look at it, you take it within context, but over a period of time, we're in a lot of debt, and now we're replacing managers, but shouldn't we have someone who can kind of sense what the market is, what's going on in the pension world, and kind of give us that feedback a lot earlier?
So we have outside consultants who are experts in the market. They give us advice, and we have a staff of professionals. So we do have those professional eyes looking at it. And as Fran said, if you look at our returns over time, they've actually exceeded other funds in both the 3, 5, and I guess the 10-year period. So, I mean, obviously we always want our returns to be better.
Yes.
And we look for kind of every way that we can get that. And, we have a new outside consultant coming in. But I think the idea that we don't have professionals looking at what we're doing is not accurate. We do.
Okay. Let me say this, that whenever there's something like the pension or the school district or something like that, that just got, big problems, what I hear is that there's no problem with us, that everything's okay and it's been addressed, and somehow we're continuously in this problem. So something other than, there should be some systemic change someplace, I would think.
Right. And I don't think that anyone sitting at this table has said there's not a problem, but I don't think the problem is because of the returns or that we can earn our way out of our problems. We have a fund, for example, where we have more retirees than actives. So we're a very mature plan. That's a big part of our problem, and that's changed dramatically over the last 10 to 15 years. The amount of benefits we've paid has gone up over 10 to 15 years. So yeah, we have to think of systemic solutions that include a number of steps, but it's not an investment problem.
It's not an investment problem, but for example, I am very encouraged by the idea, I don't know if it's a good idea or not, that Controller Bukovitz came up with, because it does address what you just said. We have more pensioners in one program as to another. But wouldn't people on the pension board come up with that idea before, like long before?
Well, the controller is on the pension board.
I'm
so
sorry.
it is a member of the pension board who came up with that idea.
Yes, he is a member of the pension board, but it doesn't seem like something that the pension board uniformly comes up with from time to time.
I don't know what to say other than it was a pension board member who came up with the idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and again, I want to, thank the board. Again, I've reserved comments during the first round relative to the proposal that was put forth, because I know Councilman Derek Green introduced a resolution calling for a hearing on the issue, and I knew you all were working on your actuarial report, but I did wanted to note for the record that from a private sector perspective, particularly as it relates to defined benefit pensions, that the Treasury, U.S. Treasury, along with the IRS, have said that buyouts are not allowed in the private sector. So again, I wanted to reserve comment. I wanted to wait for your reports, but in lieu of the fact that it was just, the issue was just raised in the line of questioning from Councilman O, just wanted to note that for the record, but I look forward to receiving further information. The next point I wanted to mention was this idea of revenue generating solutions. And Council President Clark, when you've been on the front line in that struggle, I take this idea of trying to find a way to generate revenue to bring some to improve the fund balance and the stability of our pension fund very personal, because going back to House Bill 1828, before Joe Williams was the sheriff, it was his bill with your support along with Chairman Evans, Mayor Nutter, that allowed the city of Philadelphia to enact an additional 1% sales tax, right, to help us when the market tanked in 08, increased our amortization period so that we could help to, get on sound footing. In addition to that, the sales tax that we just enacted when that was expired, okay, Council President Clark, you may remember that we were almost lone wolves crying in the wind, noting that $5 billion in legacy costs associated with what was then, according to the FY2017 actuarial valuation, represented $5 billion of legacy costs, which is associated with Plan 67. When I hear this potential revenue generating solutions, I want to be full disclosure, and Rob DeBoe, you know this, I take it very personal. I'm happy to hear about the task force. Council President Clark, you, the administration, labor, everybody at the table. That's how I think the solution should be generated, and most of the solutions will come and should come through the collective bargaining process. So I just wanted to note that I believe that firmly. I do want to go to this, the issue of generating revenue, and I want to just ask about PICA. Help me, Rob, because I forget the number. When is the date that revenue generated from PICA will, or PICA in essence, that tax will sort of be expired? Is there an upcoming date?
2023.
So 2023, can you tell me now approximately how much revenue is generated annually?
So I think there are two parts to that. One is that the PICA tax itself generates, I think it's somewhere about $350 million. It may be a little more than that. That money is used to pay off debt service for PICA bonds. The rest of that comes to the city's general fund. The portion that goes to pay debt service by 2023 will be about $45 million.
45 million, okay. Let me just note that even when that date comes, I want PICA in existence. I think Philadelphia has been a model because of us establishing PICA. Lots of municipalities across the country looked at our PICA model and said that is the way to go to avoid bankruptcy. But I know lots of people have their eyes and are thinking about this as a possible solution in the future. In addition to that, I wanted to ask you about an issue that we've heard a great deal about when you talk about sort of risk shifting in retirement savings. Have you heard anything about Maryland recently? Can talk a little bit about what Maryland just did, and if you're familiar with New York City's.
I think Fran knows a little more about it than I do, so Fran's the one who told me about it.
Yeah, so Maryland has, I read yesterday actually, in pension investments, right? So Maryland has just recently enacted a plan allowing private employees who don't have access to a retirement plan to participate in a state-sponsored plan, defined contribution type of plan, where they can invest, they can direct a portion of their paycheck into the state defined contribution plan, and it would be mandated payroll deduction in order to have savings in a retirement plan that they otherwise would not have. Now that is on the state level. It is not yet allowed on the municipal level, but that's something we've talked about a couple of times, and we think that certainly would be beneficial for the retirement security, as you have stated, Councilwoman Parker, many times, for people who don't otherwise have access to a retirement plan. It's something, it's scalable, right? We're able to scale that, and if people want to participate in that, it's a defined contribution plan. There's a lineup of investment funds, including what's called a stable asset plan if someone doesn't want to put their money at risk of the markets. And it's run by a professional investment group, and it's something that again is scalable. We just surpassed 20,000 participants in our deferred compensation plan. When you consider that we have 27,000 employees, that's quite a feat. When the current company took over in 2009, there were 13,000 participants in our defined contribution plan. So now we have over 20,000, and we're approaching $1 billion in assets. So people are participating, and people are I think, benefiting. I think those who otherwise don't have any retirement security in the private sector would certainly benefit by being able to participate in something like that.
Thank you so much for your response. And Mr. President, thank you for your patience. I just needed to get that response on the record.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And Council, I just wanted to follow up during that time when we were trying to do something with the sales tax. I do want to indicate for the record that the employees' unions not only signed off on some changes at that point, they actually years ago signed off on a deferral of pension fund contributions when the city had some significant fiscal challenges. So they did do that. And then during the course of the sales tax conversation, we were able to, through some negotiations, the municipal unions agreed to change the contributions both for existing and new employees. So they were clearly a part of the quote-unquote solution. We're not there yet, but I do want to put on the record that the employees unions did, through their leadership, try to work out a solution to us. It was very helpful to us, although we weren't able in getting the sales tax proposal that we put on the table, the collective we. We were able to show quote-unquote pension reform as a part of that proposed deal. So just wanted that on the record.
Yeah, and if I can, and I've said this to Matt many times, and Charday before Matt, the pension board appreciates all the work that you, Council President, did in championing that sales tax. And we looked at the projections of the various scenarios of what percentage would go where, and it will be a great help going forward, and we appreciate the work you've done on behalf of the pension fund along with the unions.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. But the members, we voted unanimously for the proposal, and we had a current council member carrying the torch up in Harrisburg for us. So it's a good idea. Unfortunately, we weren't successful, but we moved forward, and I'm sure we'll come up with something. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Council President, and I'm sure with our new colleague and former chair of the Philadelphia delegation, who was a part of those conversations, still has a lot of contacts, friends, and influence, just by virtue of who she is and her experience. So, I would hope that she continues on this path and, we'll be at the table as we move forward. So thank you for what you have done. Councilwoman Gim was talking about international investments, and look forward to, the data that you provide to the chair. But, I'll put my type A personality on, and, when I think of international, I just can't, I'm just reverting back to Verizon, and it's offshoring its workforce overseas, so in call centers. So that's, I'll get that point in there. Okay, now back on pensions. It is my understanding that the city was exempt from Act 44 from 2009 until January 1st of this year. Can you explain what the impact would have of this act on the city and the board?
We're exempt. So there was a provision in the act that said if you were below 50% funded, that you could be taken over by the state. We're exempt from that. We're still exempt from that.
We still are. I didn't know if we had to apply for an exception.
No, we're exempt.
An extension. Okay, all right, great. So on the retiree levels, could you either tell me now on the average number of retirees to the system has picked up per year over the course of the last 5 years, and how many retired in the system have they shed? Or you could just provide that to the chair if you don't have those numbers.
Yeah, we could do a little bit of both. So the number of retirees are above 35,200 now, and it's been roughly in the 34,000. Well, I can give you FY12, 34,234, 34,407, 34,661, 34,827, and now 35,200 and some. So it's been gradually going up. And again, the number of active employees currently approximately 27,000. So we did, speaking of Act 44, we had to do a study of the pension fund for Act 44 directed by PICA, which has sunsetted now. We don't have to do that any longer. But part of the survey that we took was looking at other jurisdictions and see how many active employees they had to retirees. And one of the things we have here is we have 27,065 active employees, 35,000 and some retired employees. That's about a 0.76% of active to retirees. If you look at Boston, for example, Boston has 1.43% more active employees than retirees. Chicago, 1.13% more active employees than retirees. Houston, 1.37. Los Angeles, 1.25. Phoenix, 1.23. New Jersey, as a state, 1.58%. We're backwards, right? We have many more retirees. We're what's called a mature pension plan. So going back to a little bit of what Councilman O was talking about, adding professionals to the board, our investment returns are not the issue. The liabilities are the issue. Our investment returns are right there with every other public pension plan over the long haul. Over the last year or so, they've been trailing. But I think, that's the number of retirees we have. We can give you a long history of the number of retirees. We can go back to 1990, if you would like to see the progression of retirees to recipients.
Well, that'd be great if you could provide that to the chair and some of those assumptions and variables that you had just read off there, if you would be able to forward that. I mean, it sounds
Yeah.
like you did that assessment.
And we did
already.
another analysis we'll be glad to send you, which is as the mature system, what effect that has on Philadelphia. And it just, we have 28.7% more annuitants, people receiving pensions, than active employees. That's a large percentage. And we could send you this analysis, which puts it in graph form and shows the effects of that.
That'd be great. The deferred comp, the 457 deferred comp, we just had a little conversation regarding, private, retirement plans outside of the pension. So how is that marketed, and what types of tools are being utilized to increase the participation?
So our deferred compensation people, ICMARC, they do seminars at every single department. In fact, they do it to shift workers at the airport. They go at 2 or 3 in the morning and will give seminars to people on that shift as they either get on or get off of their shift. They go to the FOP, they go to the firefighters, DC 33, DC 47, and individual departments. We also incorporated within the last year the ability to sign up for deferred compensation directly on the website without having to submit forms, without having to do anything. You can also change your contributions, increase or decrease, directly on the website. And we think that has had a good effect. In addition, the board has come up with strategies with deferred comp carrier in order to increase participation and including blast emails and other information. So I think that's why the participation level has gone up so much.
So what you're saying, what you explained to us here is, I mean, you elaborated on the assets, on how much they've risen in participants, right? Because I think it rose $48 million in assets?
Yes. Yeah, a lot.
And do you see that being a trend on more participants over the last couple of years?
Absolutely.
Through all those measures?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Councilman, you good? Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. In your earlier testimony, you made reference to the task force, and I'm curious in reference to the work that they're doing. Is there going to be any type of report that they'll be providing? Is there any time limit on the work that they're doing regarding some of the pension issues?
Yeah, I'll let Rob answer that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the process, there will be a report. The timeline, there's no set timeline. I mean, I think we'd really like to get this finished in the next couple of months, but there's no deadline, but there will be a report.
Okay. And I guess one of the questions, Councilman Parker raised the concept of Maryland, which is very creative, and in the conversation, I wasn't quite sure if you were suggesting that people in private employment, and will they be the ability to go into deferred comp or actually just come into our traditional pension defined benefit plan?
Okay.
It's not yet allowed as far as a defined benefit plan, and it's also not yet allowed on the local level, municipal level, only allowed at the state level. So the state would have to allow this to happen in order for us to participate. So that would require some sort of coordination with the state.
Okay. And from the work the task force is currently working on, that's a very interesting idea. Are there similar ideas that they're looking at or investigating that you can provide information on?
I think we would not want to provide kind of what's going on in task force discussions. Those are confidential discussions.
Okay. I understand. Thank you.
Councilman, we do have a representative on the task force. They will contact you probably as soon as we get done with the hearings today.
When Parker talked about this, looking at a lot of different ideas and suggestions, and because we're so in depth in the budget process this year, this spring, we probably won't have an opportunity to have a real conversation into the fall. That's why the questions regarding the timing of the task force, some other items. I know Councilman Parker also had the resolution discussing other pension-related items. So I just want to get some perspective on the timing so we can look and prepare for the fall.
Absolutely. You'll be contacted very shortly. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Thank you, Council President. While we were talking on task force, just to get a little better understanding, how often do they meet?
So we had regular meetings every other week.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That answers that. The other question I have, getting back to the financial advisors, what is the average term of a firm? I mean, I did ask for an extreme end of a length of service, but what is the average firm? How long are they with us advising?
We can give you that, but if you, in our flash report that we get every month, it has the inception date of the particular manager. So it's on a report every month. I don't know that off the top,
Okay.
what the average is, but I can get that for you.
I would appreciate that. And these reports, is it something that council would have access to? Or?
Yes, and they're on our website. They're public documents,
gotcha.
yeah, our flash report, yes.
Okay. And my last question as it relates to this is, in any way, does seniority play a role in the retention?
Of advisors?
Yeah, the advisors.
No, I would say
it's
performance, yes.
And you had mentioned earlier that you're looking at various indexes. What precise indexes are you looking at?
Well, we benchmark depending on the product. So if it's a large cap product, the index is the S&P 500 index. If it's a small cap, it's the Russell 2000. So there's various indexes depending on where the product would fit within our portfolio. So there's a mid cap index, a small cap index, a large cap index, an international index. So if we have a particular manager who may not be performing, for example, and we think we'd be better served with an index, in the small cap, we may put that money in the Russell 2000 index, for example, instead of with an active manager.
The Dow Jones index, is that used at all in any ways? Or?
Generally not used for an index investor. It's usually the S&P 500 or the Russell 3000 for the larger cap index, usually not a Dow.
Okay. Thank you very much. Council President, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council
You're
President.
welcome, sir.
Just to follow up on some of the other questions, the three rating agencies of Standard & Poor's and Moody's and Fitch all rate the pension problem for Philadelphia as a big issue for us to make sure we have under control. They also talk about cash reserves, by the way, in our budget, which I know are low. And I know that, Rob, you're a fan of getting that raised, and I would be a fan of that too, if it's possible. But on the pension issue, I'd like to know about this task force and what the goal is of the task force. What were they charged with? What is their goal? What's the goal?
The goal is to come up with a package of ideas to help improve the health of the pension fund.
So it could be 5 or 6 ideas of adjusting the fund and possibly more reserves put towards the pension.
Correct.
And the other question, which is just a minor one, the drop program, which always makes the news for a lot of people, but do other cities have a drop program like Philadelphia?
Yeah, I think the first drops were actually in Texas, I think is where they started. But so they've been around for a while.
And are they similar to our program or different?
I think there are different variations of them. Yeah, so some have different number of years, for example. Right.
Do any of the programs, are any of the drop programs as generous as the one in Philadelphia?
I don't. With some of them, you said have 5 years, so some of them may give more years. So, but I don't. I can't answer that.
Okay. Is that something we could find out? Because I know that's going to be a hotbed.
Yes, we
discussion.
can. Yes, we can get that to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I was going to ask the question, but it will probably extend your time at the table, so I'm not going to ask the question.
Thank you.
Since we have cleared the deck on members. Thank you very much for your testimony, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
For the record, And I know there's levels of confidentiality with respect to some of the conversations, so we will try to figure out a way to make sure that council members, since we are in fact in the pension plan, have an opportunity to get information, to get a sense of the task force work, in addition to which there's clearly some thoughtful recommendations that we will now have as a part of that, and I'll take care of that internally within the council.
And we're happy
be
to
part of
talk
that.
to council members private.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony.